Statement. As chair of the Exeter Housing Advisory Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. On February 10th, 2021, public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the Exeter town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided in that public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. I'm going to start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting and who that person is, which is required under the right to know law. So I'm going to go down our line here. Dave Sharples.
Dave Sharples, planner. I'm in the room alone.
Lindsay Sonnet.
Good morning, Lindsay Sonnet, and I'm in the room alone.
And Pete Cameron. Hello, Pete.
Gotta unmute yourself, Pete.
Okay, while Pete's unmuting himself, I'll go to Tim Roach.
Sorry, I had a crying kid. Tim Roach.
Hey, Pete, are you unmuted? No, you're not yet.
How about now?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, Pete Cameron. I'm in the room alone.
Okay, thank you. Who else is, my list jumps around. Robert?
Yes, I'm Rob Priden with the Rockingham Planning Commission, and I'm here alone.
Sarah?
Sarah Reitzman, Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition. I am in the room alone.
And Lovey?
I'm here currently in the room alone, but may have to step out periodically.
And our select board representative. And have I missed anyone? Other than our guests? Okay, so I want to thank our guests for coming, and Darren, I'm going to send it over to you to introduce them.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the members of the business community. So we have Renee Dion, the Director of Human Resources, and Tim Ferry, recruiter at Sig Sauer. We have Paul Valentine, who's a plant manager at Osram, and Christopher Callahan, who's the VP of Human Resources of Exeter Hospital. And I thought what we discussed on the phone was give each of these entities about 5 minutes just to explain their issues with workforce housing and how it's affecting their recruitment and retainment. And then take questions. I know that we want to be very respectful of their time. I know Paul, for example, has to be off by 9. So I would say, Paul, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Darren. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the plant manager here at Osram, Sylvania, over on Portsmouth Ave. And I think like probably Sig Sauer and the other manufacturing businesses in Exeter and the surrounding area, the recruitment and retention of employees is probably one of our biggest challenges. And the business that we're in is expanding, and we are actively recruiting new employees, and it is a very tight labor market, I would say, for the skill sets that we're looking for, and we're having to expand our radius to find individuals, and when we speak to many of them, commuting times are a big concern of theirs, and we have many of our employees commuting over 45 minutes, close to an hour, coming in for these manufacturing positions. And we pay a very competitive wage, and it's attractive for them to make that commute. But many of them do express the desire to live much closer to work. But the cost and availability of rentals in Exeter and the surrounding communities, it makes it almost impossible for them to cut down that commute time. So when Darren asked me to come to this meeting or to write a letter in support of any developments that offer some workforce housing options, I'm always in support of that, because trying to find good employees and then try to help them make a home that's in a reasonable commuting distance. That's one of our desires, and so I'm here in support of whatever we can do to enhance the options for this population in the community. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Chris, you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Chris Callahan. I'm the Vice President for Human Resources, not only at Exeter Hospital, but at Exeter Health Resources. So we have a visiting nurse group. We run core physicians, as well as Exeter Hospital. We have 2,500 employees. 70% of them live in our primary service area. Only about 10% live in Maine and Massachusetts, so most of them are relatively local, not 70% in the town of Exeter. I think I have two lives here. I have pre-COVID and then after COVID, and I think that probably is the same for a lot of employers. We have folks now that have been sent home to work remotely, and that's probably 400 to 500 of our 2,500 employees were able to do that. We have just started to actually do some recruitment out of state for remote workers. So it's interesting that we've hired folks in Michigan and North Carolina and Virginia over the last couple of weeks to start to do things remotely for us in support of our patient care in the Seacoast area. But the vast majority of our employees are our neighbors. We found prior to the pandemic beginning an incredibly tight labor market, up and down our employment ranks, from housekeeping and food service to specialized physicians. It's a very, very competitive market. The Seacoast unemployment rate was less than 3% for a long time, and made it incredibly difficult to recruit at all levels within the organization. One of the other things that I've noticed in the availability of housing stock is a preponderance of new developments going up that are age 55 and up, and that is not a workforce that is looking to come to Exeter Hospital. And by the head shakes from my colleagues at 6 Hour, I know that that's not their target market either. So I think that we do need, as a community, to focus on affordable workforce housing. I've seen a couple of apartments going up recently that I think are probably quite attractive to folks in workforce housing. I think a mix of rental and ownership is probably increases the stability and the stickability of our employees to the town of Exeter. We know there's a difference between renters and owners, and having an affordable mix would be an improvement, I think, in our ability to recruit and to retain. I see challenges, going forward, especially in healthcare. There's a great concern about post-pandemic PTSD and our ability to keep really, really good people who have worked incredibly hard under incredible circumstances for the last year. And we really could not be prouder of all of our employees and their ability to come to work when they were uncertain of actually what was going on, and render great care to our patients and do just a marvelous job to keep themselves safe, as well as keeping our patients safe. Those pressures are going to get even greater in the future related to recruitment and retention. I think in the Seacoast. And I welcome the committee's efforts to try and address this issue for the businesses here. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Chris, thank you so much. I should mention that Chris is actually my wife's boss, and she speaks very highly of him. So she's one of the employees that you were just talking about. So Tom, Renee,
I did her evaluation already, so this will have to carry over till next year. But
that's awesome.
Enjoy working with Vivian very much.
Renee and Tom.
Hi, good morning. I'm Renette Dion. I'm the Director of Human Resources for Sig Sauer. And we currently have 400 employees in our Exeter facility with 37 current openings, of which 29 are for skilled employees. As early as this past week, we had a candidate from out of state that we were trying to relocate. And when they checked the dynamics of the area, they decided to decline the position. So it is very tricky for us to relocate people into the area based on the availability of housing. The cost of it is sometimes a surprise for people that are moving from the south. But Tom can talk a little bit more about the actual recruitment strategies that we've been trying to implement, along with some of the struggles that he's had with the candidate flow.
Yeah, thanks, Renette. Yeah, so I'm on the front lines, hearing it every day. I just got a call 2 days ago from someone we're relocating. He's due to start on Monday. He's from Austin, Texas. And he was like, Tom, he goes, I'm still excited to come to SIG when there's a lot of excitement about our company, obviously. And so I still want to come. But I have a $400,000 budget, and I can't really find anything that's going to meet my needs right now. Now that could change. He's going to rent for a little while, and that's just one person, and this is an hourly employee. It's pretty dire right now in terms of housing. That's just one example. I've had somebody from Massachusetts just this week cancel an interview. We hadn't even gotten to the interview phase, and he's only in I think he's only in Attleboro or somewhere in Massachusetts. It's not worth it for them to make that jump during COVID, and we're trying strategies to deal with that situation too with COVID. We're in fact on the 27th we're having a drive-through job fair at the Exeter facility because we have so many locations, and we're trying to come up with creative ways to attract new people. We have to try to hire as much as possible in the area, and we've been here a long time. So those are the challenges. It's nothing that I've been in lots of these different kinds of meetings, and it's nothing that we all don't know about. But now it's just everything's sort of magnified with COVID. Thank you.
We welcome any opportunity that you can provide to get us some great housing opportunities for the workforce so that we can continue to build the labor market here in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming and doing this. I know that we're going to open it up to questions in a second, but before anybody goes, I think it's important if, Sarah, you could kind of speak to any legislation or anything that the efforts that your group is making, so they know that they're not just telling us they have issues, that there's people really that want to kind of work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast, our primary function is working on our sort of local policy, but there is a lot of legislation that's going on right now. We're definitely in the swing of things, and we've already seen quite a few public hearings. So I'm happy to send along, this is sort of the list of legislation that we're paying attention to. Probably most importantly is HB 586, which was one that we were all excited about last year. It's a combination of HB 1629 and 1632 that died last year because of COVID in June when the legislative session got, waylaid there. But it was something that came out of the governor's task force on housing. It provides incentives and training to planning boards and zoning boards, and it comes with a whole slew of sort of things in there. So those free training materials to members of the planning board and zoning boards, increasing how we're using the RSA 79E, so developers can take advantage of that, establishing a housing champion certificate program at OSI, so communities can get some special benefits for doing these things like that Exeter has been doing for years, working on this issue. And other things like that. And again, I'm happy to sort of send this whole list along. There's going to be lots of opportunities to advocate. And one of my questions, I won't jump ahead to the questions, Nancy, but one of my questions is about how to support your advocacy, because as the business community, you have a really strong voice when it comes to our lawmakers. We've relied on the business community a lot to influence legislation. That's how the workforce housing law was passed back in 2008, and we still need those strong business voices. And luckily, it's easier than ever right now to advocate because everything is remote and you don't even have to speak. You can just sign in ahead of time, which is really easy. So when you're not available for a public hearing, you can still be there. HB 586 has already gone to committee and had a public hearing, and it's out of committee. It's the first one that I'm aware of with an ought to pass recommendation. So I'm sure there will be another opportunity to advocate for that. But there's a few others, like SB 86 is one that we're interested in. It would particularly part 2 of that would reestablish the New Hampshire Housing and Conservation Planning Program, offer some funds to communities to explore the relationship between housing and conservation. There's another one that just had a hearing on Tuesday, SB 127, making some appropriations for affordable housing. So that's some money to the Affordable Housing Fund. And then there's another one that has a public hearing next week. That's HB 154 relative to community revitalization tax relief incentives. This is Representative Casey Connolly's bill. It's in the Municipal and County Government Committee right now. And this would enable municipalities to offer revitalization tax incentives for the construction of additional housing in designated areas and make some changes to how the Affordable Housing Fund at the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is used. There's a public hearing for that one on February 18th. And so that's something I'm happy to send that information along. By all means, do reach out to me anytime. So there's a lot right now, and I have at least a dozen more on or half dozen more on my list of legislation that we're paying attention to. And again, the bulk of our work is this education and advocacy at the local level, because we're really looking for those local zoning changes. But this state level legislation is just incredibly helpful in helping us to push this along. So that's all I'll share for now. But by all means, I'd love to connect with each of you.
So Nancy, I'll just turn it back over to you and the questions.
Okay, so Tim has his hand up, but Tim, I'm gonna let the guests respond to Sarah's question if you don't mind. What support could be helpful?
Well, I know at Exeter Health Resources, we participate pretty regularly in the Business and Industry Association. So I know that this housing issue and affordability is on their action legislative list. So I think that we contribute in that way. we'd be happy to help out. We're seemingly advocating a lot these days for healthcare and PPE and vaccines, and how do we support the state. So we can work that into our agenda as well.
And 6 Hour is interested, obviously, in getting more involved than we had been in the past, so that we can have a better understanding of what is available and how we can actually help our candidates that are coming along.
Okay, thank you. Tim, you have a question?
Yeah, just a little bit of a comment. I apologize for my rapid introduction. There was a little child incident that I had to take care of. I'm Tim Roach. I'm the director of Rockingham Planning Commission. I'm not sure that the business owners know who we are or what we do, but we're a legislatively enabled regional planning organization that works with all 27 towns in the southeast corner of New Hampshire. One of the primary things we're legislated to do is a regional housing needs assessment, which takes a snapshot of the stock on the ground, what's out there for affordable housing, and the controversial part is this suggestion that we need to tell all the towns what their fair share of workforce housing is, and towns don't like to hear what their fair share of workforce housing is from what's perceived as this regional level of government, which it's a little bit of a misperception, but we'll leave that aside for now. But we haven't done that in a number of years. I think 2015 was the last effort at that, and we're not funded to do it. We're legislated to do it without funding. So that's an issue that we have, and one of the struggles that I have as the director is trying to figure out how we're going to piece together, anywhere from 40, 50 to, up as much as $100,000 to do a really good job on that assessment. So we're working on that. We're working on finding the funding and piecing the funds together to help that. But what I was excited to see this opportunity to talk to you all, because I think we can do the assessment and we can talk about how important it is to have inclusionary zoning and everything else, but we haven't made any progress just based on the good graces of what we should do as a society. It's going to come down to money, and it's going to come down to, I hear what your struggles are, and can we quantify the cost of what you're facing? Can you guys put the dollars to the challenge that you're up against? And if companies like SIG and Osram and the hospital can say, hey, there's a cost to us to have to do all this extra work, but there's also a benefit to bringing these people into the region, that's where I think we'll make progress. And if we sort of frame it around all housing stock and sort of that rising tide to lift all of us up, and again, just bring it back to the dollars. And I think we're going to start to make progress at the local level and at the state level. And then let's get some of these people out there. Let's get the faces of these people that don't have a home to come to work for you. That's the other part of it, is to get faces to it, because we talk numbers and dollars, do it all the time. But if you humanize it a little bit, we can make a little bit more progress as well. So I wanted to put that out there. We're going to try to get this done. Like I said, we're looking for private funds, we're looking for government funds, but we're going to work on that over the next year. Especially as the new census data becomes available, it'll help us a lot. And I just wanted to let you know we're out here and we're working on it, and would love to partner with you on ways to message this better.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. When we talked about having this meeting last month, pulling this together, we wanted to see where this meeting would lead us to, and with the hope of a future regional meeting. So, Tim, thank you. The idea of getting some faces of people who are willing to talk to a regional committee about these needs, I agree, would be helpful. Darren, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the private folks here know that what we struggle with, Exeter, as an example, passed something called the mixed use neighborhood development zoning change last year. Probably not familiar with it, but what it does do is it allows in certain corridors where we want to see growth, density growth, 10% of any new mixed use project. If 10% of those units go into workforce housing, there's a number of benefits that the owner can enjoy, such as higher density, less vehicles per, one vehicle per unit versus one per bedroom. So there's setbacks, height, all kinds of stuff that makes it more palatable because the market rate is so darn high. So that's what we're trying to encourage in our neighbors. And that's what this group is going to try to do, is to hear your stories, be engaged with you, and then try to get some of these other communities. As an example, Northampton, no interest at all in putting infrastructure in there because they don't want to, this is a quote, become another Portsmouth. And so Exeter, as an example, borders 10 towns, and only 3 of them, Epping and Hampton, are really making efforts to try to accommodate, frankly, you guys and your workforce. And so it is very important that we engage with you folks. We get you whatever legislation is out there, get you information, and then anything you can give us to try to help you is what we want to do with this effort starting now. Because if other communities kind of got on board with this mentality, we could solve this problem. If they don't, it's going to continue. I personally, being an economic developer, I find this to be the workforce housing is the number one issue in economic development, and probably will be for the next 20 years in this area. So thank you so much for being here.
Does anyone else on our committee have questions? It's 2 minutes of 9 and one of our guests needs to leave by 9. So,
come on, Dave, you got something, right?
I don't have any questions. I just thank them all for coming. I understand the issues with the workforce housing and support, any and all efforts to do it. I mean, I put forward and wrote the MUND and, got the grant to get it. And now it's just a matter of, developers getting interested, because a lot of times another setback to it is they'd rather go, the MUND is in kind of focuses on redevelopment and building, absorbing additional units where infrastructure exists instead of building new infrastructure at the cost, at the long-term maintenance costs associated with that. Basically, where infrastructure exists, you're stacking dollars upon dollars and meeting a need for affordable housing. So I hope more people take advantage of it, but I'm all for this effort. All for it.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question. If one of the guests could speak to this, what seems to be the travel time that new employees, potential employees, are willing to travel? This is toward our future conversation in regional aspects of this.
I'm not certain that I have, a number. I've commuted a lot over, my life, and, I can tell you an hour is too long, although you get really smart by listening to National Public Radio for 2 hours a day. And I found that about 20 minutes is probably perfect. It allows you to get ready for the day and decompress a little bit on the way home. I would say, based on where our population works or where our population lives, I think probably the magic number is 20 to 30 minutes would be kind of the outside.
I agree with that.
Yeah. This is Tom again from Sig Sauer, and I'd have to say that I really can't find people, over 45 minutes, I'd say, in terms of commute time, again, depending on the pay and the position. One of the challenges is to educate people that it's really not that far, talking specifically about the Exeter plant, to get people to come down from Rochester, even though we have a closer facility. There's a different kind of machining that we do in Exeter. And if you have those skills, okay, come on down to Exeter. It's really not that much further. Or another good example would be someone coming from Concord or up in the Lakes region to come down 93 and over 101 is really not that bad. So it's a constant education to try to get people to understand that when you have an all highway situation like 101's great. That it's really not that bad. Whatever that's worth.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just like to make one point. I think Tim had asked kind of what is the consequences or the cost of not having this housing. And yeah, commute time, I agree, 20 to 30 minutes is ideal. But for, I would say, a higher paying job or a higher wage, people are more likely to kind of bite the bullet and drive 45 to 60 minutes. And we do see that, but the consequence of having to pay higher wages to get people to commute farther distances, at least for our manufacturing and our products, the consequences will be that we will go away as an employer. And so our products don't have to be made in Exeter. We've come up with technologies and that's the reason that we're manufacturing here. But if our labor costs continue to grow and they're growing because we're having to pay more to attract people to commute further, that's the consequence. We will go away as an employer.
Thank you, Paul. That was has been a concern for a lot of us. I have one more question since Tim, your hand's still up. Are you all set for right now, or?
I was just going to ask, just similar to what Paul was just talking about, but is there data do you have zip code data of where your employees are so we know what the current makeup is, how far people are traveling? Again, I really want to get to that point of, there's a cost to this. From just commuting is one thing, but people aren't spending money in the region. They're not spending they don't have the money to spend on other things because they're putting gas in the tank. That's another aspect to this. So there's so many ways we can slice and dice this from an economic perspective and really tell the story. That's all. I don't want to do a regional housing needs assessment that just says, Stratham should have more and Northampton should have more because we've done that and they don't care. I want to get an economic planner, an economic person in on this assessment and say, everyone needs more housing and here's the consequences. So sorry, I'm getting a little bit repetitive, so I'll stop. No,
it's all important. I think we all agree.
I got one more, Nancy. Just out of curiosity, would businesses participate in not to take money out of your pockets, but would you guys consider participating? Do you think the businesses would consider throwing $5,000 in a bucket to support that type of effort? I'm just going to throw it out there to see if everybody would do it. Because I'm looking for grant funds. I'm looking for government funds, local funds. Just asking if the businesses would see value in a true assessment of what we need to do. And you don't have to answer now, but just give it some thought.
Okay. So I have another question then. A public transportation we have the train, but if somebody wants to take the train to Exeter, other than a cab, is that something that we should be looking at too? Is that something that's come into play for any of the recruiting part of your businesses?
Speaking on behalf of Sig Sauer, one of the things that we're looking into right now, believe it or not, is actually busing people up here from Massachusetts because we don't have the skill set available here or the people able to get here. So Tom's been actually working on that recently so that we can see where are those students that, they might be mechanical engineers that are not in a location yet of working, and we would bring them on to work in our machining area with an opportunity to have potentially a rebate or a refund or a bonus towards their student loans. We're looking into, Lawrence for some mechanical people that they might be in the mechanics industry right now, but they can run a machinery and have no way of getting here and have never considered coming to New Hampshire to work. So all of those things are things that we have to really think out of the box these days in order to enhance our recruitment opportunity, because for every machine that isn't running, not only does the company not make money, but we're not able to fulfill military orders on time, and it doesn't help the economic area here in New Hampshire.
Renette, if you do that, when you're looking into that, please let me know, and for all of you the same, because I think Cobham would partner with you on that. They're having the same issue, and that might save share costs.
All right, great, thanks.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
I do. I just wanted to ask, because I think most of the people on this call have been in their positions for quite a long time, and I'm just curious how much worse it's gotten and how fast has it gotten there. I've only been in Exeter for 6 years. I wonder if 15 years ago was this not a problem? 10 years ago was workforce housing not a problem, or is it just getting worse and worse and worse?
I think it's come with how quickly the businesses in the area have grown. 6 years ago, Sig Sauer had maybe 800 employees. We have 2,200 employees now. And I would say 1,900 of them are all in New Hampshire. So it is based on the availability, the skill set of the people, and yes, the housing. But it is also about how quickly all of these companies have grown over the last years.
Yeah, I agree. It's always been an issue. Since I've been doing this staffing for almost 20 years, housing has always been an issue. It's just gotten worse.
Yeah, so I've been at Exeter for 13 years, and I've seen it gradually get more challenging. I think the New Hampshire advantage 20 and 25 years ago was no taxes and low cost housing, and we have really eroded that. With the increases in the value of the housing market, it's not an advantage anymore, therefore we're relying only on the tax advantage between New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and that's used to be a bigger deal. I don't think it's as big a deal anymore.
Okay. Thank you. One more question, I guess. It's just before we let you go. Are guests okay with me sending an email with Sarah Reitzman, Tim Roach, and the four of you, so that if you decide to connect out of here, you have that information?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Sorry, the train just went by. I live right on the tracks. Is there anything further anyone wants to add to this conversation right now?
No, thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to come. We are hoping to do this again, whether it's a follow-up meeting or a regional meeting. This is really an important issue, and we want to keep the conversation going. So thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Very much appreciated.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Okay, committee.
Nancy, can I just have a second before I go?
Absolutely.
So I didn't want to say this, but somehow we have to figure out a way to either incentivize or legislate the other towns that simply will not, Kensington, Stratham, et cetera. We have to do that. And so none of the legislation out there does that. And if there was legislation that allowed for, some sort of benefit, some great benefit to do that, perhaps that's the right way to do it. But there's no chance that Exeter, Hampton, Epping, and 2 other towns, whatever, that are trying to help these businesses can help these businesses without, without all of us doing it. Because there's plenty of land.
We can't all absorb that. I agree. These 3 towns cannot absorb this need.
If you guys, this effort you're doing, Nancy, which is fantastic, I guarantee you I can get a lot of businesses to support as you try to do this regionally. I can get any business because they all have this issue, even smaller businesses. And that's where you're going to have to put the pressure on the legislators. If the businesses put pressure on the legislators, you heard exactly what Paul said. He's not kidding. Osram, it's a German company. They can pick up and go anytime. The expansion that SIG decided to do in Rochester only happened because the building became available. And they wouldn't have done that in Exeter. And the reason they wouldn't have is because there's no place to live down here. Rochester's a little easier to find workforce housing. So anyway, just thanks you guys for doing this, and anything you need from the business community, I can get you.
Darren, before you go, I wonder if there are any businesses based in some of those towns that are reluctant to get on board with this that can put some pressure on local leaders in some way.
Absolutely,
or at least
I'm sure there
force
are.
them to the table, right? Like, isn't there a way we can force these people to have a discussion? Because it just comes down to convincing them that this is something they need to care about.
I think you're right.
There has to be a way. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. If the businesses that are in those communities that are paying these high taxes can easily put pressure. They just need you guys to be the conduit, I would think. If you can find a champion and 1 or 2 champions in any one of these towns and bring them to this meeting and then put together a plan and then call it a sales job, then I think it can start to work, because they're not isolated. Osram's not isolated. Companies will simply go away. Land is a lot cheaper down south. You know what else is a lot cheaper? Electric. SIG has a massive problem with how much they have to pay for electricity. So costs are phenomenal.
Maybe we can start to identify some of those businesses. I mean, it might be outside of your catchment area, but maybe that's what we do.
Look in Stratham. Look at Lint and Bauer and Timberland and that whole industrial park. I mean, that hits Northampton and Stratham and Exeter. It's
right. That section is in Stratham. That's a great idea too.
Thank you guys for doing this. It means a lot, and anything I do to help, I will.
Where can we get a list of all of our local businesses? Is that available somewhere?
Yeah,
local
I have it.
And then regional?
I have a list. I have the 12,000 businesses, and even Tim and I both have it, and then so does, and we have Portsmouth for Nancy. So we have those emails that I send out. I don't know if anybody, I know Lovey knows them and Dave knows them, but the emails I send out go to all those businesses. Every business that has an email address that is a business in good standing, we have all their contacts, and I'm very, very happy to put a message out there. So if you guys put together something, we can get it out there.
Well, that's where my thought process is going here. The next thing is we're very grateful for the Exeter businesses that came this morning, and we want them hopefully to continue to participate. But now I think we need to spread this out to our neighboring towns. Invite, have one more invite meeting, see where that goes. I think we just have to take a step at a time and see where it leads us.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Darren.
Nancy, do you mean invite our neighboring towns to
businesses?
Businesses. Okay.
We have tried. We did try one regional meeting with the local town officials, right, Sarah? I can't remember now. It's been a few years.
Yeah.
We had some turnout, but not what we had hoped.
Nope.
But as Tim said, and I think we all agree, we don't need just our town officials in these meetings. We need our local businesses and putting some faces that are willing to come forward and talk about what their challenges are, the employees. I think local officials will get involved when they start to hear that the possibility of businesses leaving will help incentivize them to start looking at this issue.
Yeah, I totally agree, Nancy. And it's challenging to get local officials from these towns that aren't doing anything to participate because they know to avoid me, so they don't show up. And that's just, it is good timing though with Stratham. They have a new town planner. So they hired their new town planner, and he is very much an affordable housing advocate. So we need to get to him before Stratham.
Well, good luck to him and Stratham. Good. Oh. And I like how you say they avoid you with a smile on your face.
They do.
It's a challenge. You're fine.
Sarah, I think Stratham is an opportunity. And Mark used to work for me in National Regional Planning. I hired him out there. So he's a good guy, and I think he'll do some good things in Stratham. If you haven't met him yet, Dave, go over and say hello when you can. I think you guys would work well together.
Oh, that's good to hear. Very good to hear. Okay. I would like everyone just to kind of think about our next step. I think the local businesses, regional, our town, in our neighboring surrounding towns, to invite those businesses to participate in a regional meeting. I think that's the next step. Does everyone agree with that? I'm seeing heads nodding, but I also can't see you all the way. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea, Nancy. And I'm sorry I jumped back in. I've been missing in action forever and let Rob sort of take over here for a bit. But
Rob has been great to be part of this too. So I'm glad to see you both here.
That regional housing needs assessment, like I said, when I mentioned it to that group, is something that I'm targeting for this coming fiscal year. So starting July 1. Mm-hmm. A little bit dependent on where the census data is and how that evolves for the 2020 census, because that really, I just decided we're not going to do it until we have the fresh data, because then we just have to update it again. So we're sort of trying to time it out with that. But again, I want to look at it in a different light, because we've had this list of everybody's fair share of housing, and that's the quickest way to get a community to quit the Regional Planning Commission is to tell them they don't have their fair share. And that's really not what it's about. I think it really is about, trying to make people understand that there's an economic benefit to this.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And Ostram's a perfect case. I'd love to be able to build case studies into that analysis that shows the benefit of, all levels of housing stock, from workforce housing up to that $1 million house that's being built down the road here. So.
Yeah, well, I ran into it for several years now with just Exeter saying they already have their fair share. So, it works both ways, and we need to try to find a different way of communicating the problem.
The message that I want out of this is not going to be about fair share. It's going to be about the economics and the greater benefit to the entire region.
Yeah. And Rob has updated us on the needs assessment and where that's at, and that you were waiting for the 2020 census. So he's been representing you very well.
Excellent.
So Nancy, you're thinking that we're going to handpick some of these businesses and contact them?
Yes, I'm going to ask Tim, and so Tim, and you're being asked now, and Darren, I will send an email to send a list of businesses. Then I'll send that out to the committee. And I don't know. Do we want to just have this conversation? And we have to be careful about how many we're inviting, because it's COVID, and we can't have this at the town hall where we could have 50 businesses come and all have a conversation.
You're thinking an in-person meeting.
Well, I don't want to wait that long. So I don't know what I'm thinking. It's still formulating in my mind here. Do we limit it? How many do we limit it to? We have to pick, say, 20 businesses in our region to further this conversation. And I'm throwing a number out there.
Okay. You're talking regional.
I think that's our next step. If anyone else has any thoughts on this, please voice them. I'm just throwing some ideas out there, brainstorming. So I don't want to wait until post-COVID. We don't know when that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are we thinking, so to help cut numbers, are we thinking specifically sort of focusing on those trouble communities? Like, do we want anyone from Portsmouth there? Certainly I could get folks from Highliner to participate.
I hate to ask this question, who's Highliner?
They're the fish packing company.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Honestly, I don't think that's a bad idea because all of these businesses have issues. And, one of the concerns that I have is it's great. They need to survive. So busing, if that's what they need to do. But the idea of living local is working local and spending your money local. So if we're busing people in and out, they're going right back home to their communities. They're not stopping and having dinner. They don't have that option. So we want to try to find a balance and retain these businesses. So
what would be the intended outcome of the regional meeting? Just trying to think it through. What I did hear from some of those guys is that they feel kind of tired of sort of talking about this. So it'd be nice if we have some action items in mind, like how to convert this energy into, are we asking them to go back to their towns and put pressure on what, where do we want it to go?
That's a good question. I mean, we've heard from 3 businesses in Exeter. I didn't get that impression, but I think that they're looking for just working with us and anyone for that matter to help alleviate the workforce housing issue. Mm-hmm. I wanted to expand it to see if there's any more input on this issue that we haven't heard yet. I think it's worth one more conversation and maybe 10, 20 businesses to, if it becomes repetitive, we know we have all the issues in front of us, right? Do we think that we had great representation from our town this morning? Do we think that covered everything? I'm interested also in transportation. We have this wonderful train depot, limited parking, which is being worked on. But if somebody wants to take the train into Exeter to go to work, how are they getting from the train to their workplace? We have some disconnects, I think, there too, for transportation.
Yeah, I think you're right. The one thing I think wasn't maybe represented is there's that group of employers sort of is up here with their salaries and their benefits and everything else for the most part. There's a whole other tier, there's your service workers, your restaurant workers that almost, if your Osram employee, mechanical engineer at 6 Hour isn't living here, the person waiting your table is probably struggling too.
Okay. That's a great point, Tim. So our next focus be on inviting small businesses instead of the larger, to get their perspective. Tim, that's perfect. That hadn't occurred to me. I'd like to think it would have eventually, but it didn't yet this morning. I think that actually should be our next focus now that you say that. Couple of small business owners in Exeter to let us know what their issues are. What does everyone else think about that? Any input? I'm going to reach out to Darren. Ask him for a few examples of some smaller businesses too. That's great because you're right. The level of income or pay rates for the bigger businesses is going to be higher than a small business can afford to do.
Yeah, and it's not to say that the hospital doesn't have the same challenge with the folks that are cleaning rooms and taking care of the it's that service industry that just making sure we recognize that it's them too, and so just find a balance. Just
right.
Look at businesses. I think next to get a little bit more perspective. I think you're right on transportation as well. I mean, RPC, we struggle with that with the DOT and the state and funding, public transportation. I mean, there's potentially an opportunity with the federal change in the federal administration and, Mayor Pete as the Secretary of Transportation. There's, if they can get the funding together, there may be more opportunity to get more public transportation rolling, but it'll take years.
It will.
So,
I just wanted to have a perspective from them on that. If that's an issue, is it, where it falls?
Years ago, when Stratum struggled with funding Coast with the route that I don't even think is running anymore down into Exeter, or if it's on demand or whatever.
It's actually on demand. You have to call to do it.
Yeah, no, Scammons came out and spoke at the select board meeting, I think in Exeter years ago, and said, hey, I have an employee that I need that relies on that bus to get from Newmarket to Stratham. I mean, that's, Scammons not, they've been a Republican family for a long time.
Very conservative, yeah.
So it's a bipartisan thing. And I think, if there's more money from the feds, maybe we can get the state to match it. And
the ridership part of it in our area just wasn't there either to offset. So the conversation became, each town wanted to know what their ridership was, and they were only willing to put in what their local residents were using. And
not to get ahead of ourselves, but maybe if we get to a point where we can bring Coast in and bring Rad Nichols in to talk about that, because I'm not a transit route expert, but to me, somehow it always seemed that route was just entirely too long to go from Newmarket to Exeter to the mall in Newington and then back. It was just entirely too long. And I just don't know if there's if we can generate the demand, you might be able to do a smaller Stratham Exeter or Newmarket Exeter that sort of parallels the train and maybe works in conjunction. You could take the train or the bus between, Durham and Exeter or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we'd solve
all kinds of stuff we can do. We're not going to solve it all here, I know.
We aren't, but it's good to just even touch base on these issues. So the idea is the perspective. Get as thorough a perspective as we can on this and see where it leads.
Transportation was central to my conversation with Highliner too, because they have folks who are living in Rochester where it's much more affordable and commuting down to, they have a location at Pease or on Borthwick Ave near the big medical facility there. So if you don't know that, bus ride on a coast bus from Rochester to Portsmouth is incredibly long, but not only that, the bus schedule didn't align with the start of their shifts. So they had to adjust the way that they were scheduling their employees and running their shifts. And they ended up, instead of relying on that, they are actively busing people up from Massachusetts to come work at Highliner. So there's a lot of Florence, Mass employees at Highliner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the cost of transportation is not just bus timing, it's the tolls. We have, Hampton tolls. We have the one in Dover. Is it Dover? Yeah, I believe it's in the Dover line area. But yeah. Okay. So I'm going to reach out to Darren and ask him, have a conversation with him about our smaller service and just the shops downtown, the owners of the shops downtown. If everyone agrees that that's the next step.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
It seems to me that a couple of institutions here I've not heard anybody talk about the Academy, which is probably a significant employer, nor Riverwoods, which is a significant employer. Is there some conscious reason that they have not been talked about?
No, it's just we've just started. So Darren just reached out to a lot of businesses, and these were the ones that responded.
Oh, okay, because I don't think the problems associated with workforce housing are any less or greater, but the Academy and Riverwoods are significant employers.
I have them noted as two businesses to reach out to for participation.
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to do something at the Riverwoods end, I can do that.
Yeah, sure. I just, yes. Do we want to try to do this for our next meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Okay, sure, Pete. If you would like to do that, that would be great. I want to try to keep this as, as close with Darren as we can, because then I only have so much time. So if I am trying to coordinate different businesses and Darren's trying to coordinate, I don't want to duplicate our efforts.
Okay, that's fine.
So, but I will ask Darren, I will add Riverwoods and PEA. And I just want to make sure Darren's okay with doing this. He seems willing. I just don't like to assume.
Another one, and we're talking about smaller business and service workers, another one that's been really active in talking about housing is Las Olas in Exeter, right on the line there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, because so now we're focusing, coming back a little bit. So our next meeting, we want to focus on some Exeter smaller businesses. Well, Riverwoods is and PA not so small. However, they do have a service part, and we didn't ask questions about that of our guests this morning. So yeah, great. I think we have a plan for our next meeting. That's exciting. Okay. So Sarah was able to give us an update, legislative update. David, did you want to add any to that at all?
Oh, nothing to add at this point. I don't know what's going on. I'm on the New Hampshire New Hampshire Planners Association Legislative Committee, and Scott, who usually runs it, hasn't reached out yet. So I'm going to send an email and we'll get going. But I've been plowing my way through. I maybe gotten, a third of the way through all the new bills, because they come out and there's 1,000 of them, and a lot of them you read and you're like, oh my God, but
I know
they're not going anywhere
every week.
Yeah, you have to weed them all out. So I'm in the process of just checking through them, like, okay, circle back, and I'm about third way through them. So
okay, thank you.
One thing on that, Dave, is I think Jen Sizz is heavily involved this year up at Stratford with NHPA's legislative. We do that at RPC. Sarah looks at it. Energy groups do the same thing. There's so many people doing the same thing, and I know we all have different interests, but I was sort of hoping that at some point we can just sort of connect everybody so we can take Sarah's expertise on housing. And, I have Scott Bogle running it at my office as a transportation planner, but he's sort of running the legislative effort there. It'd be really helpful if we could just all and we'll try to coordinate this outside of here, but NHPA is, all the different groups that are doing this, if we can just sort of have one list and understand where everyone else is coming from. Because we're not experts in everything. I guess that's my point.
Well, no, that's what we do. That's why I'm doing that exercise. New Hampshire Planners Association, they take positions, and I'm always the one like, what does that have to do with us? So I'm always narrowing it down. So we should only focus on land use and
right.
Does it actually affect planning? But I think there's similar groups like yourself would probably overlap. So it does make sense to try to work together. So
definitely.
Yeah. I included in that email. I'll include the email, and I'll include that as well.
I'm also going to send out this updated legislative update that has sort of the primary ones that we're focusing on, the one that we're opposing, and then the few others that we're watching but not necessarily taking a stance on. The other thing I want to send to this group is the New Hampshire Housing Prepared instructions for remote testimony and signing into a bill. It really is just ridiculously easy this year, because you can sign in to support or oppose or be neutral ahead of time, and you don't have to show up. But at least you're sort of part of those numbers. So we have a lot of bills where, there's 37 people signed up in support, but, only 4 people spoke or whatever. It's great, though, because it means you don't have to be available at the public hearing time if you're not available.
Okay, so Sarah, you might want to hold off until I can get that email to you with the 3 businesses and their contact information. I'll do that with you and Tim so that you have that.
Yeah, I'll send it to them, too.
Okay. Yeah, it might be a little later this morning. I need to get to the office. So, yeah. And I believe all three of the businesses thought that was a good idea. So that will help Tim have a conversation with them about the needs assessment and you with the legislative aspect, which I think they felt very open. They seemed very open to. So it's going to be a crazy afternoon for me, so just bear with me. Did everyone have a chance to look at our meeting minutes from January 8th? Any questions? They're okay as is?
They look great.
Great. Good. Okay. That's it for our agenda. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about this morning? All right. Well, I have some work to do, some emails to send out again, just and lots of meeting minute notes to type up. So I will kind of get to all of this as soon as possible. I hope today, but it all depends on what's going on at my office when I get in. And our next meeting is Friday, March 12th.